Thank you. How come it starts at 13 minutes and 29 seconds? I didn't say a word. I'm sorry.
I took it from you probably, so we fixed it.
Okay. Thank you to Meir Linzen and my dear friend Irit for inviting me to participate in this program. Is it anti-Semitism to support the destruction of the one and only Jewish state, home to approximately half of the Jews in the world today? Is it anti-Semitism to say that Jews do not have a right to self-determination, that Jews have no right to exercise sovereignty in any borders in their ancestral homeland, the land of Israel? You, I'm assuming, would most probably say that of course that is anti-Semitism. You may even think I'm asking an absurd rhetorical question, but I'm here to tell you that questioning Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state is being debated today on campuses across the United States. Most people in the U.S. today are able to recognize traditional or classical anti-Semitism, the anti-Semitism that we associate with a swastika or the Nazis. It's more difficult, however, for many to identify the anti-Semitism that targets Zionism and that denies the right of Jewish self-determination. I'm going to focus my remarks today, this morning, on this rapid spread of this form of anti-Semitism in the United States. I do this not to minimize the significance of classical anti-Semitism, but rather to provide you with a new legal approach to combat this frequently misunderstood and dangerous form of anti-Semitism. As president of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law, I speak nearly each and every day with students who are experiencing the rising anti-Semitism at universities and who are crying out for help. At the Brandeis Center, we utilize law-based initiatives to empower these students. Last year, we launched our Jigsaw Fellows, our justice initiative guiding student activists worldwide, to train law students in the areas of law necessary to combat anti-Semitism so that they can guide and advise undergraduates. And we are drafting guidelines to educate university administrators on how to comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. 10 days ago, a sophomore at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., known as GW for short, published an opinion piece in the New York Times. The student described the growing campaign at his and other universities to marginalize pro-Israel Zionists and, quote, push them to the fringes, close quote. As the student noted, and I quote, on college campuses and in progressive circles across the country, it does not matter if you strongly oppose the right-wing leadership in Israel. If you are a Zionist, you are seen as the enemy. Close quote. In the wake of this increased hostility, the students at GW urged the university to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, definition of anti-Semitism, which has been adopted by the U.S. State Department. I spoke to the student at GW who was coordinating the effort. What you would not know from the media is that Jewish Voice for Peace, JVP, an anti-Zionist organization that deceptively includes Jewish in its title, led the opposition. The Palestinian group, Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, which is responsible for much of the anti-Zionist hostility on campus, remained silent, leaving it to the Jews, JVP and J Street, to oppose adopting the internationally recognized definition of anti-Semitism. JVP told the university that the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism equates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and therefore, if the university adopts such a definition, they, the members of JVP, will feel isolated. JVP was concerned that if the university adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, JVP might be precluded from being recognized as a student organization on campus. Let's be clear. There is nothing in the IHRA definition that precludes anyone from criticizing the policies of the government of Israel. In fact, the IHRA definition explicitly says, and I quote, Criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic, close quote. So why was JVP concerned? Because according to the IHRA definition, quote, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g., by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, close quote, is a contemporary example of anti-Semitism. And JVP opposes the existence of Israel as a Jewish nation state. GW's administration did not want to alienate any of its students. So at the student government hearing held last week, rather than adopt the full IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, Jewish students were pressured to craft a definition of anti-Semitism that would not isolate Jewish voice for peace. In other words, the pro-Israel students at GW were pressured to agree that support for the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state is not anti-Semitism. In the end, a watered-down version of the definition, which removed the, quote, e.g., by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, close quote, language from the definition, is what ultimately passed. So how are we to respond? First, we must get the public to understand that what we are witnessing is not a free speech issue. The trend that we are witnessing on university campuses and beyond is the result of an organized, well-funded propaganda campaign to marginalize pro-Israel Zionists and deny them a place in society. That is harassment and discrimination, and we must articulate it as such. Since you are lawyers, I will explain the legal implications of this distinction in a moment. Second, we must establish that denying the right of Jewish self-determination, denying the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state, is anti-Semitism. So how do we do that? We start by recognizing that Zionism, the yearning and desire of Jews to reestablish their Jewish homeland in the land of Israel, is an integral part of our shared Jewish ancestry and ethnicity. Zionism as the political movement of the Jewish people may have originated in the 19th century, but this desire and determination of Jews to return to their ancestral homeland in Israel, that is thousands of years old as Abraham and the Bible. This determination of Jews to return to Zion is the glue that has kept Jews connected for millennia. For centuries, Jews have prayed not only facing Jerusalem, but they've prayed to return to Jerusalem. The Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, is recited every year at the Pesach, at the Passover Seder, and again at the conclusion of Yom Kippur. Do you know that over half of the 613 commandments in the Pentateuch are related to the land of Israel and can only be fulfilled in the land of Israel? The Jewish connection to the land is so strong that for thousands of years, wherever Jews have lived, they have prayed for rain. Not for rain where they reside, but for rain in the land of Israel. The experience of the Ethiopian Jews demonstrates how inherent Zionism is to Judaism. In the 1980s and 1990s, thousands of Ethiopian Jews returned to Israel. These Jews experienced tremendous hardship during their journey. Some literally walked hundreds of miles across the desert. Throughout their ordeal, the Ethiopian Jews were motivated by a compelling personal determination to reach Zion, the Jewish homeland. When they finally arrived in Israel, believe it or not, many were shocked to discover that the Jewish temple had been destroyed. These Ethiopian Jews were completely unaware of Zionism, the political movement. It was their religious and ethnic devotion to the land of Israel, an integral component of their historic Jewish identity that motivated them to persevere and eventually reach Israel. Zionism is as integral a part of Jewish identity as observing Shabbat or adhering to the kosher dietary rules. Just as it is anti-Semitic to attack Jews who follow these practices, so too is it anti-Semitic to attack or harass Jews for expressing the Zionist part of their Jewish identity. Not all Jews observe Shabbat or eat only kosher food, but attacking or marginalizing those Jews who do, specifically because they do, is universally understood to be anti-Semitic. Similarly, many Jews identify and support the Jewish homeland and understand Zionism to be a key component of their Jewish identity. Harassing, marginalizing, demonizing, or excluding these Jews on the basis of the Zionist part of their identity is just as unlawful and discriminatory as attacking a person for observing Shabbat or keeping kosher. To be a Zionist means to support the right of Jewish self-determination in the ancestral homeland of the Jews. It does not mean giving blanket support to all the policies of the current government of Israel. If I celebrate the fact that the Jews returned once again to the land of Israel, if I celebrate that the Jewish state of Israel exists, then I am a Zionist. Those who oppose Zionism deny Jews this right. Judea Pearl, the father of the late journalist Daniel Pearl, coined a term for this. He called it Zionophobia, an irrational fear or hatred of a homeland for the Jewish people. The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, as I noted earlier, recognizes that Zionophobia, denying this fundamental core Jewish belief, is de facto anti-Semitism. Even the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has noted that, quote, attempts to delegitimize the right of Israel to exist, including calls for its destruction, are contemporary examples of anti-Semitism. Denying the right of Jewish self-determination is anti-Semitic not only because those who deny this right single out the Jews by supporting self-determination for all other groups, such as the Palestinians or the Kurds or the blacks in South Africa, but deny it only to the Jews. It's also anti-Semitic because it demands that Jews shed a key component of their identity as Jews, namely the historic yearning and determination to return to Zion. You might have heard Students for Justice in Palestine, an organization supported by American Muslims for Palestine, is spearheading the effort on campuses to marginalize and ostracize Jewish students. The goals SJP posted for its 2018 national conference equated Zionism with, and I quote, ethnic cleansing, destruction, mass expulsion, apartheid, and death, close quote. The goals went on to note that SJP students could have, quote, hope, close quote, that Zionism could be, quote, destroyed, quote, and dismantled, quote. But most importantly, the goals said that at the SJP conference, they would not just talk theory, but would also, and I quote, focus on developing actionable local and regional campaigns with clear targets, close quote. So if you are a student group whose goal is to destroy and dismantle Zionism, and you plan to develop actionable local and regional campaigns with clear targets, I ask you, who are those targets? Pro-Israel Zionists. And what do those campaigns look like? They look like what we saw last year at New York University when 53 student organizations representing the entire progressive community on campus pledged not only to support BDS and to boycott Israel, but to also boycott the pro-Israel student groups on campus, meaning that they said they would not engage with or dialogue with or co-sponsor events with the pro-Israel students. What message does that send to the pro-Israel student at NYU? It's saying to that student, if you want to join our campus community, if you want to be a full-fledged member and demonstrate with us on climate change, women's rights, or LGBT rights, we'll accept you on one condition. Check your support for Israel at the door. Shed that part of your Jewish identity, and you can join us. As I suggested earlier, that's no different than demanding that a student stop observing Shabbat or stop keeping kosher in order to gain admission. It's comparable to demanding that a Catholic student disavow the Vatican or a Muslim student shed his or her connection to Mecca. This scenario is not limited to NYU. It's playing out today on many campuses across the United States. It's happening, for example, at this very moment, at Arizona State University, where a draft resolution is circulating calling on student groups to not only support BDS by boycotting Israeli goods and Israeli academic institutions, but also boycotting, and I quote, ASU's pro-Israel clubs, students supporting Israel, and Sunpack by not co-sponsoring events with them, as well as boycotting off-campus pro-Israel groups such as, and they list, Birthright Taglit, Stand With Us, Christians United for Israel, the Maccabee Task Force, Mosaic United, Zionist Organization of America, AIPAC, and ADL, all included on their list. Many of you may have read last week about the University of Toronto Graduate Student Union, which when asked by Hillel to support the Jewish graduate students' campaign to make kosher food available on campus, replied that they most likely would not support the Jewish students' request because Hillel was, quote, an openly pro-Israel organization. What you may not have realized unless you read the articles carefully is that the University of Toronto Graduate Student Union responded this way because back in 2012, the Graduate Student Union adopted a BDS resolution similar to the one adopted by NYU and the one that's being circulated today at ASU, where the Toronto Graduate Student Union pledged to boycott pro-Israel groups on campus. Hillel is a pro-Israel organization, so the Graduate Student Union representative was explaining that due to the pledge it made 7 years ago to boycott pro-Israel groups on campus, it could not now collaborate with or support Hillel's request for kosher food. That, my friends, is where we are headed in the United States. The BDS referendums that are being introduced on campuses across the U.S. today are increasingly calling for boycotts of all pro-Israel students and organizations, not just boycotts of Israeli goods and Israeli academics. This discriminatory conduct is not limited to campuses. During question and answer, I can give you some other examples of how it's happening now off campus. Anti-Zionist groups have become so emboldened they are no longer hiding their anti-Semitism. They have learned that if they use the word Zionist instead of Jew, their anti-Semitism is accepted as legitimate political discourse. We're merely criticizing Israel, not Jews, they say. And the world mistakenly thinks that what they're witnessing is just a political disagreement. You are lawyers, and I'll finish this. You, in particular, can appreciate why it is essential that we describe what is happening as harassment and discrimination, rather than as mere political disagreement. Our laws do not protect us from an opinion we may find offensive, and in the United States, even hate speech is protected speech. So if we effectively utilize our legal tools to combat anti-Semitism marked as anti-Zionism, we have to begin by accurately describing it as harassment and discrimination.